welcome to Hearts of Iron 4. I am Lord Forwind, and I'm here with a guide on how to play Nationalist China, which is Chiang Kai-shek. And while I haven't gotten the achievement Awaken Angry, I figured that since all that's left is to subdue the warlords, which is not particularly hard as China, that I would do a video on how to do this. So it is roughly November 2nd, 1940. It's a little bit slow on kicking out the Japanese, but I've got a solid strategy that will prevent the Japanese from, I think they took at most 9 provinces from me and my allies. So the first thing to do is you have this wonderful issue right up here in Beijing where you start. The Japanese control this land right here, and their vassal of, what is this, Manchukuo controls this area as well. Meaning that at the beginning of a war with the Japanese, you're pretty much going to lose this land here. So the best strategy that I have found is to build level 4 forts along the entire riverbank, cede Beijing and essentially these 3 provinces up here to Japan. You can't really defend them. Instead, the strategy is to use the river crossing penalty, which is around 30% usually, to fortify right here. And this is all you want to build before the war starts, is you want to do 4, 4, 4. I did this to 5, but that was during the war. I found I needed 1, so maybe 5 there, 4, 4. You probably want a 3 or a 2 here. I didn't actually need this fort here at all. And the other point that may be a good point to fortify is right here, but that can start after the war is done. At least get level 1, level 2 forts there, just to make sure they can't take that peninsula. In fact, you want them to invade here, because then it will create a second front and it'll take pressure off your northern front. Next things to do is when you start off for researching as China, and this is, I've tried this like 5-6 times. The best strategy seems to start with Military Affairs Commission, because you need the army experience to be able to reform your army and actually have defenses. So that seems to be a very good start, and that will get you a tiny bit of army gain to start. The next thing to do after that one I found was to jump over here and do invite foreign investors, because that will give you two civilian factories. Obviously it's not going to show it on mine because I've completed the war. After which usually the best thing to do is unified industrial planning, expand the Academia Sinica, and then make a beeline straight for United Front, because Japan will start off not going directly for the war in China, but once they hit, oh wait, it's gonna change the outcome. Oh no, it didn't. Okay, here we go. They will go off and do some of this stuff on the side first, but once they research the Liaison, wow, I cannot say that today. Anyway, that conference, they will do Greater East Asian Cove Prosperity Spear, and then usually they will either do Marco Polo Bridge Incident or they will wander off and do one other one. But the key point is you want to research the United Front on the same day they research the Marco Polo Bridge Incident. So if you look for the liaison, can't say it today, I'm sorry. Once they start researching the conference, you roughly have 2 to go yourself, which means as soon as you see them start researching it, you need to be on nationalism pretty much. You need to research nationalism immediately after, which means the 3 principles of the people need to be one of your early research. So Military Affairs Commission, invite foreign investors, unified industrial planning. You want to expand Academia Sinica because you start with 2 research slots and you're immensely behind in tech. And then you want to do 3 principles of the people, and then by and large go straight for the United Front. You can, of course, form the United Front before Japan invades. If you can, that's good as well. And then you pretty much want to devote all your resources initially to doing these fort lines. In terms of political power, the first thing to do would be get Chiang Kai-shek. I probably said that horribly wrong. Or it's probably Shang Ko or whatever. You want to get him going for the political power gain, which will allow you to pass more of these essential like reforms. Then the next thing I found was either do the First Lady of the Republic here, this lady, who's very unique in the game for her bonuses, I didn't go for the theorist because you could get increased army experience gain and it might be worth doing, but I forgot to do it. Next thing to do is get the genius for army defense, then the infantry genius, and then the army regrouping, and then probably the division attrition general military high commands, because you start off with a whopping negative 50% defense penalty. Although luckily when the war starts, China will have a penalty towards attacking you. The goal is to get rid of that as soon as possible, and putting roughly 30% defense on all your units will help you. Most of your armies are going to be infantry, like literally just infantry, like even the artillery is stockpiled, which you can't build at the beginning of the game. Essentially, you want to devote all your starting factories towards making guns. You want to keep one producing fighters because Japan will not get much better planes for most of the war, so you can, just with one, maybe two, produce enough planes to keep your air force in the air and fighting. You could also devote a little bit of resources to bombers. The problem is you're not going to have much oil, not a lot of aluminum, and no rubber whatsoever. Then you want to trade for resources. You want to try and get your steel production up. I found out the person who tends to be the best one to trade with is usually the Soviet Union, because once the war starts, you'll have a land route to them, so you won't need convoys, which helps. So you want to take most of your starting armies, most of the units that are contained in central China and northern China up here, and move them all to this. I tend to use this guy here, Zhang Zulang, or Lang, however you say it, because he has no negative traits, but you could also use, where is he? I think it's this guy. Yeah, you could also use one of these guys for the defense as well. Essentially, you want to get them in there, and you want to give them whatever you have, the defensive doctrine. And this trick is to use the fallback line button rather than the front line button, because that can pull them off the defenses if you actually go on offense or your allies take it, which tends to mess up your defense immensely. You want to essentially put it right through here. Be careful when you do it, because if you do it like this, a lot of the times it will not actually move your troops in that area. Sometimes it will put the line up there, but it will not see like that. The green, they're not going to actually put troops up there, which is really annoying. Really actually quite annoying. So you can overcome that by using the fallback line. I recommend you extend it at least here, and then once the war starts and Shaanxi joins you, extend it straight through their lands to here, essentially. You pretty much want to hold this line of provinces. You don't want to go too much up here because these are forest provinces, and you cannot build forts in your allies' territory. Luckily, there's some mountain range here that you want to control. This will be the weakest point of your defenses, a hills province, because you will not get the immense defense bonuses of a mountain, nor will you have forts in the area. So that is what you do with your normal army. What you do with your coastal army is essentially you want to try and start, you want to fortify here quickly. I don't know how you want to do it. But then essentially the end goal is what you can see here, which is essentially a single unit in every single coastal province. One single unit can hold off pretty much any Japanese naval invasion. You might suffer an initial invasion, which is why I recommended you fortified right here. Because you do start off with the tiniest navy in the game, pretty much. Where is he now? Oh, he might have died. I usually have a navy unit out there. Where is he? Come on. Ah, here he is. You essentially want to put a commander in front of your navy, put it to convoy rating, essentially put in the East China Sea and the South China Sea. You can try the Yellow Sea, but it will be wiped out virtually immediately. You'll want to go to your single dockyard and essentially assign all production to that fleet. Either put on destroyers or light cruisers. I did destroyers because they're actually faster. Although this will change somewhat with the man the guns achievement, you should have enough oil and resources to at least have a small fleet in there. And the big point of deploying them to those two southern regions rather than the northern region is to direct any naval invasions to right about here. For some reason, Japan likes to try and take Qingdao, or however you say it, which is why fortifying is good. It does start with a level 1 fort, but annoyingly, it's not part of any of the state around it, so you can't simply use the garrison area as well. It's rather annoying. Essentially, once the United Front forms and Japan declares war, of course, you want to move across to here to fortify this region. This area is mostly desert, and so Japan will not go through this very quickly, but instead your allies, the other warlords, will tend to give you their armies, send expeditionary forces to you. You can pretty much take all your troops you get from Sinking, or however you say it, and Zbei Sanma, or however you say it. I'm not getting into, I don't know how to pronounce Chinese names, and essentially deploy them along this line here, trying to take advantage as much as you can of the river. If you get driven off this line into the mountains right here, it's not the worst. In fact, the mountains are almost better to hold, but the river makes it look nice, plus you get that lovely defensive penalty, or bonus. They suffer the penalty. And then right here, this area is going to be where they break through. Luckily, it's a desert. Their supply line is going to be terrible, and you can hold off pretty much that whole area, like 10 to 12 Japanese units. The nice thing about the fallback line is that when your units are pushed off of it, they will attempt to attack and retake it, which helps a lot. And any units, any units you essentially get from the click down here and Yunnan, you want to put into your naval defenses. You can do it two ways, as I said, with the fallback line, which tends to be pretty good. You got to be a little bit careful on some of these peninsula provinces where the province behind it is the only access route. You got to make sure that green covers the area when you're drawing a fallback line. Or, of course, you can use the garrison area. I tend to use the fallback line rather than garrison area because that tends not to prevent the Japanese from landing. It just tends to prevent them from expanding. And if Japan lands any troops, you have to hit it with everything you've got to try and kick them out. Send as many troops as you can, pull them off your other coastal defenses. You've got to wipe them out before they get control of a port, because if they do, they will start landing tons of troops and then they'll push you back. And China can't really fight a two-front war other than right here. I found this to be, or this, they had already taken this by the time I fortified this region, and focus on fortifying it. When the war starts, the key things are to try and get down here to War of Resistance, War of National Liberation, and War of Anti-Imperialism, which in order to do that you also have to pass army reform, which as soon as the war starts, this should be your next research with the focus tree. You want to get those reforms as fast as possible. Luckily, with this strategy, you'll be on defense, which means you'll be getting lots of army experience because you're going to be winning battles. Next things to focus on, I found, were trying to get the mission to the US, get their opinion up, then do British cooperation. You're going to have to boost their opinion of you a little bit. Luckily, you get that. You've picked the guy that gives you 15% more political power, so you can spare some. You want to get the Burma Road going. Investment to shipbuilding is a bit of a luxury one, but it will allow your navy to be slightly larger. I don't know how that's going to change with man the guns. But the key one is construction battalions, because that will give you another 5% max entrenchment. The reason I picked Burma Road over the French one, Hanoi route, even though the Burma Road gives you 2 off-map military factories, but the Hanoi route gives you 3. The reason I did that is as much as what France gives you is pretty good, British will give you a lot of the naval stuff and also air stuff. Well, British air, US naval. You can do this. I didn't, in fact, need to because I had that small production of fighter planes. So we'll see. I would have to boost the opinion of them to research it, but then I could go down here, get some good people. The Flying Tigers is pretty good for the US if you don't manage to win as fast as I did. And the Chinese Expeditionary Force will net you another general. And if you get to the Lido Road, you'll get another off-map military factory. It's not necessarily as good as the French drill, but it's still really solid anyway. Eventually you'll want to go down here, get modern logistics, and then expand to this once you win the war. but doing this is key. I never need these 60 divisions plans, the Bureau, or the Wampa Military Academy, which could be useful if you're having trouble affording new leaders because it decreases the cost of getting them. But I haven't even touched democracy or welfare. That's more something to do after the war. Then the next key things are financial policy, which gives a wonderful negative 5% consumer goods. Which is the lower you can get your consumer goods as China, the better, because you start off with inflation, which gives you 5% more consumer goods. So getting that guy, as you can see, I put him as a political advisor, which is a pretty good political advisor. Price controls will get rid of inflation completely. Grain tax is really nice because it gets rid of 10% consumer goods and makes it so essentially, I think I'm using one factory for consumer goods. 2 factories now, pretty much. I really haven't built any substantial amount of military factories. A little bit during the war. I focused on mainly building the forts, which took a good portion of the war. Building and upgrading them. The level 5 took a while. And then I pretty much, the next best thing is kind of do some military, maybe 1 or 2 if you need it. But the civilian factory is key to, of course, build up your economy. But once you push Japan out and you take over this area, you're going to pick up a good amount of civilian factories anyway, which will make a difference. I won the war. I had, I think, 18 factories versus Japan's like 30 or so. So it's very doable. But the key is to never go on offense until you've essentially wiped out, I think I killed about 2.5 million Japanese troops while only losing like 300,000, 200,000 until I went on offense. The last 12 months, actually, no, 500,000 here. But if you go to the actual war, it doesn't show it that well because you can't go back further than 12 months. But for the first like 2-3 years of the war, I won between 88 and 96% of all battles. I didn't lose any of these. I lost this Hills province once, and then I had to retake it. For producing troops, you want to try and get as many troops being trained as possible. I wouldn't really go above 8 because at that point they tend to just take forever to train, but 5 is a little bit too little as you grow in size. So somewhere between 5 and 8 seems to be the sweet spot for your base infantry. You'll note I haven't actually changed anything about the divisions, so it's very possible to win with just infantry. Obviously, you could do more with that, but you don't really have an industrial base to produce much more. You could maybe make your divisions larger, but putting artillery in them just weakens them. Putting support units in them weakens them as well. I did produce 2 cavalry units because I did need some quick moving units. That proved to be pretty useful. I got like 22 of them. As you can see, I've trained quite a few of them. And then I went and researched Mountaineers Division to try and get some slightly better troops in there. In terms of research for China, one of the first things to do, you got to research new gun. That is a huge upgrade. You definitely need it. Everyone else in the world pretty much already has it. Research that. Research support weapons, but devote one of your researchers to your doctrine, which is really good for China because you have a lot of troops. While this might change in man the guns, I don't think the actual doctrine trees are going to change much at all. Mass assault is really good. It reduces training level, increases reinforcement, reduces your supply consumption and stuff, which is really key as China because you do not have a massive factory base. As you can see, I didn't even complete it. Pretty much once you get vast offensives and breakthrough priority, you can consider starting to go on offense. Because at that point you should have a very large army. I think it may skew my divisions because some of them are from other people, but I think I have somewhere around 150, maybe more. Japan never got above 78 when I fought them, and currently, and I killed off a lot of them when I started the advance. I trapped them up here. One of the key things is do not let Shaanxi fall, which is why putting the defensive line out here helps, because otherwise what tends to happen once it falls, the Japanese will gain, of course, control of any provinces you do not own, which will really mess up your defensive line as all of a sudden Japanese territory appears behind your defenses. Plus, they actually produce a decent amount of units. So there's that. Other than that, it's pretty basic stuff. I wouldn't really worry about the communists. You'll get a notification at some point when the communists start getting a little aggressive, but it's also one of those points where you can kind of remember that once you start invading up till to Korea and stuff, you do have to do some communist search. Don't worry about the communists before the war. If you got historical focuses on, they won't attack you before the war. The key is, of course, to survive Japan. The biggest trouble with Japan is they have tanks. You do not have tanks. Well, you could use anti-tank artillery, and you might consider throwing that on, like, I don't know, your Mountaineers division or something. I didn't see the need to build it. You could just overwhelm them with sheer numbers. But if you can hold this line of defenses right here and prevent them from landing any amount of naval troops through this style defense, Japan has no hope of beating you. Really, the only way Japan can beat China is if you don't reform your military fast enough and they start taking all your states up here, because that's where a good portion of your factories and stuff come from. If you're worried about losing land, obviously produce and build factories out in the back. You do have the option of industrial evacuations if you need it. I never needed it. Same thing with scorched earth, forced conscription, and all that. You shouldn't run out of manpower at all. At one point, I did pass the limited conscription because I had excess political power. But one of the key things is, while you're preparing for the war, I didn't really pull it off until I was in war, is to switch your economy law. I initially switched it to partial mobilization because you start on civilian and it does reduce it by 10% your consumer goods, which is key. Plus it allows you to build military factories. But once you're at war, switching to war economy is pretty useful. You could theoretically save up the political power and wait until the war starts and then swap almost immediately, which would be useful, save you 15%. You wouldn't have to spend 300. Stuff like that you can figure out. But level 4 fort seems to be key. Level 5 takes too long to build. Level 3 is not good enough. Level 5 fort here. As long as you produce troops, put them there. I had an entire division, this guy 24 units for most of the war, devoted to solely standing right here in a fallback line, where I used this guy's division to also hold that line, but also hold out the line out into here. And then I essentially created this group, mostly out of volunteers from the allies, as you'll see, little flags, to essentially fight the Japanese in the desert. And they were actually pushing them back, the allies, without me ever going on offense. So essentially, this is how to do Awakening Angry as China, which is forcing Japan to sue for peace is key. After that, you just have to win the struggle for leadership, which, considering how much larger and more powerful you are, the really only problem is if you let Communist China infiltrate all your provinces. So that will be it for this sort of guide and advice on how to play China. Don't focus on Navy, really. You could theoretically build some more naval factories if you want to, but really you need the military ones. You can win the war with just infantry, as strange as it sounds. Pretty much the point to realize is that for most of the war, Japan is going to look really weak. Their troops are going to have like 12% supply. They're not going to be well organized. Don't attack. As you push them further back towards their territory, that will change. And if you move off your defenses too soon, they will counterattack and overwhelm you. That happened to me in one of my tests of this. So essentially wait until they pretty much stop attacking you completely, which was about 1940, 1939, they kind of stopped too. You pretty much want to ignore the rest of the war in the world. You want to make friends with the Germans. I found tend to be better than the Soviets. You get an extra general, you get an off-site military factory, which you don't get with the Soviets. You instead get a volunteer group with them. It's okay. It's nothing amazing. But the big thing is you get general staff and wargaming divisions, which can help you get more skill for your generals. After the war, though, you're not going to have Sun Tzu Reborn unless you, I don't know, focus everything on one field marshal, which is not the best plan. As you can see, I kind of divided it out. This guy got to be the highest. He's about halfway through level 5. He's pretty good. Lots of defensive focus. Better defense your generals have, obviously, the better off you are. Some of your generals will level up quickly. The key things you want to get is infantry leader they'll earn, because they're going to be commanding infantry defenses, which will get 15 defense on all infantry divisions. The next thing is get ambusher. Get it on all your generals, get it as fast as you can, get it on your field marshals. The plus 10% entrenchment combined with the bonus you get from working with the British or the French, combined with the defensive stuff, and your tree will allow for some stupid level of entrenchment. I think I had plus 78% entrenchment on your standard unit. Plus it'll help you with recon, so you're going to be almost one-on-one. If you're entrenched, the Japanese cannot push you out. Of course, you never want to fight one-on-one. You usually want to outnumber the Japanese on your defenses because they'll have tanks, and tanks are really good. The next thing was I picked Commando Camouflage Expert on most of them, just for the damage reduction, because at one point Japan controlled my skies. They will earn Skilled Staffer, which will help. That's pretty much it. For your field marshals, obviously Defensive Doctrine is key. If you can get Unyielding Defender, that's also good, but you kind of have to start with it. Organization first or Charismatic, I'm not sure which is better. I picked Organization first because reinforcing the armies is always key, but Charismatic might help if you're getting pushed back so that your troops can recover and fight. And as you can see, I did the same thing with Ambusher here. You'll earn like Hill Fighter, Desert Fighter. You'll earn stuff that will help you fight in the desert and other areas. So that is it for my guide on how to play China and how to force a Japanese surrender earlier than expected in the game. You don't have to wait for Japan to attack the United States. You can, of course, but you should be able to beat them pretty much on their own. You'll be given Taiwan. Korea will be released. I don't think it's worth refusing Japan's surrender and keeping pushing, because if you're trying to get the achievement, you have to take the surrender anyhow. And you'll get all this region, and then you only have to worry about the communists afterwards. So thank you guys all for watching. If you have any other questions, comments, or things change as things progress, please let me know and put it in the comments. Essentially, this is what I have for bonuses on China at the moment. As you can see, lots of defensive bonuses. Yeah, and surrender limit. You don't need to boost your political stability, you'll get it automatically. And war support, you're going to have almost 100 anyway. So, thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in another video. Bye for now.